I said it last week and I'll say it again this week. You see where we are, so you have to know what it is. Episode 3 of the Black with BSAAC Podcast. Can I get a round of applause from the audience? I say this every episode, but today I'm very, very excited for what we have in store for you. It is the last episode, so do me a favor if you haven't already. Check back our last 2 episodes. Very good conversations in those ones, and I'm looking to beat it today, so no pressure to you guys. I got a new crew with me. I'll kick it to my right to get introduction from everybody. First of all, I'm Daniel Oladejo, if you don't remember, of Nigerian descent, and I play football at the University of Ottawa. To my right, I have a distinguished guest. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but afterwards, I'm going to do a proper introduction.
All right, thank you, Dan. You just raised expectations. I don't know. I'm Dwayne Provo. I'm the Associate Deputy Minister for African Nova Scotian Affairs for the province of Nova Scotia within the Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage. Former pro athlete and a proud father.
Oh, there it is.
African Nova Scotian.
Yes, sir.
Alyssa.
My name is Alyssa Provo. I am of African Nova Scotian descent, and I play on the women's GG basketball team. And I am his daughter.
My name is
Applause.
My name is AK Ismail. I am from Somali descent, and I play football for the University of Ottawa.
Round of applause. Everyone's getting a round of applause here.
My name is Savannah Provo. I'm on the women's basketball team. I'm of African Nova Scotian descent, and I am also Dwayne's daughter.
There you go.
So, I mean, if you haven't put it together by now, we have 3 Provos on the podcast today. I mean, Alyssa and Savannah, both accomplished women's basketball players here at the university, still looking to accomplish more. We're looking for a championship this season, and accompanied by their dad, Dwayne Provo. And that's the reason I'm so excited for this episode. I mean, if you see, I'm going to share the bio with you, and you're going to put together, I mean, this is an all-time resume I'm looking at here. All right, Dwayne Provo is the current Associate Deputy Minister of, the African Nova Scotian Affairs, Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage. Born and raised in the community of North Preston, which is Canada's largest Black community. Dwayne has a Master's of Education from Mount St. Vincent University and a bachelor's degrees from St. Mary's and Dalhousie. Dwayne has a background in education and served as a provincial regional education officer, advising governments on issues affecting African Nova Scotian learners. Also worked as a provincial school health coordinator and executive director of the Black Educators Association of Nova Scotia. He served on national and international education committees, including with the World Health Organization. That's a big deal. International School Health Network, Canadian Teachers Federation, and National Alliance of Black School Educators. Dwayne was appointed the Associate Deputy Minister of African Nova Scotian Affairs in October of 2021. Now that I've given a proper introduction, can we get a round of applause for Mr. Dwayne Provo, joined here by his 2 daughters. So, we're going to get things rolling. Today is really just the Dwayne Provo episode. That's what we've called it, the Dwayne Provo episode. We got to appreciate Black greatness whenever we get the chance. It's something we've talked about in our last 2 episodes. Our last episode, if you recall, was called Black in Academia. And what better way to continue and build on that conversation than having a distinguished Black academic here today. So, we're going to start, really, the Dwayne Provo story. We're going to start with the early life. We mentioned he was born and raised in North Preston, Nova Scotia. Dwayne, what was that like?
Well, look, it's something that a lot of folks, at least in Canada, if you're of African descent, don't get an opportunity to experience. Mm-hmm. So, growing up in an all-Black community, all Black school, I think had a lot of pros for us, very few cons. But the one thing was that the folks that we went to school with were also our friends, but we didn't have to deal with those nuances that, in schools where folks were, are concerned about racism, concerned about all these things. That just wasn't necessarily something we had to deal with. It was really basically, the community was the community. When you're young, that's all you know. Mm-hmm. So it was good to see that. Now, what we did notice is that a lot of the folks that were in front of us were not necessarily reflective of us, which was another thing. But we did have some members of our communities that were in front of us, which made a big difference. So, growing up right until grade 4 or 5, not heading out of the community until grade 5, you're really isolated. You're allowed to get some of your early learning done in a way which was really in a safe environment, right? So, that does have some of its pros that way. But then the integration piece, we're able to do that once we moved out. That was a big piece for me. Those are friends till today. Our community is our community. So when you say where you're from, North Preston, whoop whoop, we do that, and also son of East Preston. So we'd spend all of our weeks in the weekday in North Preston, and then my mom's from East Preston, so we're in East Preston, was one of the second or third largest black communities in the historic black communities in the country. So coming from that, we had our own way of doing things, and we looked out for one another in a way that black communities do, right? Yeah. I mean, that's really what it is, and still what it is to this very day. So that's the small educational piece of it, but so that's the very beginning. The school piece is seeing everybody doing all that, but growing up's been in that community's been it's been something that once you're from a certain community, no matter where you're from, you're always part of that, no matter what. And you have a special place in your heart for it. And I'm there every weekend. I'm in East Preston now, right on the outside of East Preston, and that gets to some other stuff that you'll probably talk about a little bit later, around how sometimes properties and things of that nature for folks of African descent, how you talk about gentrification and or land being taken, and those things sort of happen. So that's a little bit of that stuff going on as well. I
mean, that's definitely a big thing. I think a lot of times in black communities, there's that strong identification with where you're from. I know for me personally, being of Nigerian descent, I was born in Nigeria, but I haven't been back in a long time. But when people see my last name, especially people from kind of my tribe, the Yoruba tribe, they know right away, oh, he's like, I'm subletting my room right now, and someone messaged me like, oh, I'm trying to sublet or whatever. I get on the phone with him, and he's like, oh, you're Yoruba. And then he starts speaking to me like, oh, like we've been friends for a long time. There's that really strong identification with kind of where you're from, your roots and things like that. So, AK, you mentioned you're Somali. You were born and raised in Ottawa, right?
Yeah, born and raised
So do you kind of have a strong identification with your community in Ottawa, or where you grew up, your neighborhood type thing?
Yeah, 100%. I think it happens a lot when I just kind of see a fellow like Somali, they'll be asking like, same type of thing, like your tribe, where you from, you know what I mean? And there's also like, if you're a lander or like a non-lander, that's another thing. So it's like, for example, when I'm working at Movadi and I'm at the gym, and I see a Somali guy that I've seen before, it's always like Saddam, which is like dab him up, give him a hug, and so I'm like, you know them? I'm like, not really, but I've seen them enough times, you know what I mean? So,
exactly.
Same thing with like the aunties that come in, it's the same type of thing. It's always like the most respect, so same type of identification.
Yeah. And then for a listen in Savannah, having that, your dad being that connected to his kind of community and upbringing, things like that, how do you think that's kind of played over with your lives and your identification with where you grew up? You can kind of give your backstory as well, where you grew up, how you identify with things like that, and then also what having a dad from North Preston, the largest black community in Canada, was kind of like growing up.
I mean, well, we grew up, like you said, we grew up outside of North Preston due to, everything that's happened. So we didn't necessarily grow up within the largest black community in Canada. We grew up right outside of it. Yeah. We went to the same schools. Our schools were mostly black up until, a certain age or a certain grade. But I still feel deeply like I am from North Preston. I'm from East Preston. Even my mother's side, I'm from Dartmouth. Like I am a prodigy of African Nova Scotian descent. Doesn't matter where it's from, all over.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on also, like, since our grandparents from there, lots of family is in North Preston, so we just spent lots of time up there on Sundays, on weekends. It feels like home. Like, when people would ask like where you're from, I wouldn't really say like Lake Echo. Like yes, I live there. That's like the address, but like North Preston, like that's the community that I feel like I belong with.
Yeah, and that's huge for, like I was saying, with Black communities, having that strong. It roots you, like it grounds you. Like, you know, this is where my people are at. This is where I'm from. Like having that strong sense of identity rooted in where you're from, definitely huge. And like Dwayne mentioned earlier, he was a professional athlete, which is no small feat. Just wondering, did growing up in North Preston kind of kickstart that journey, or how did you end up getting into kind of pursuing athletics professionally?
That's a long story. So how long is this podcast?
You got a bit of time. You can dive into it. Give us the details.
The pro athlete thing is later on. Really, it became about having a love of sport, just sport in general, and we learned in the ways that most, in the backyards and doing things. Not the guys that would all suit up in all the hockey equipment and at the rink down outside the community, but typically sports in which didn't cost much, that we could play ourselves. So, basketball, and you looked up to all the guys in the community. That was a big thing, the big tournaments in the community, and the older guys would, have us, make little teams, and we do that stuff, and that was always a big thing for us. But, we played, whether it's ball hockey and all that as well, right? I mean, hockey's Canada's thing, right? So that's what we do. Ball hockey, but it's on pavement, right? We do, what we do, make makeshift nets and all that. So we did all of that, but also football. So we played football on the, the fields, especially one up above where my mom and dad are on our property up behind the house. And friends would come in, we'd play some football there, but also we played on the roads, right? Yeah. So, you get 10 yards, you just do those 10 paces. So you do the 10 paces, you take a rock, mark that first down line, right? And then you go again, right? 100%. So we did a lot of that, and that's really where sports started, but for me. But we didn't really get into organized sport until I got into junior high school. And in junior high school, I was fortunate enough, usually you didn't start until grade 7, but they allowed me to play at grade 6. My brother played as well, so I was able to. My first taste of that was playing, volleyball. A little bit of volleyball, and I can tell you a little bit of that as we go. And I was able to play volleyball, but also I had to play. I had a chance to play touch football. My big brother, he's only 1 grade ahead of me, right? Yeah. My big brother's on the team, so that was fun. So I got a chance to play with him a couple years because we went to another school after. I guess that goes back to what I'm talking about in terms of, you said, what is that experience in the community? When you're in a marginalized community like we are, and then you tend to go outside of that community. One of the things for us, most people go to maybe 2 or 3 schools, their academic, career, from elementary to their public school career. But for us, so we did the first 2 years. We had 2 schools in our community. Allen W. Evans we did from grade primary to grade 1. Grade 2 to grade 4 we did at Nelson Winder, which is also inside. Grade 5 to grade 7 we did it at Ross Road, which is outside of the community. Grade 8 to grade 9 we did at Robert Borden, which is further outside the community. Grade 10 we did at the Bell Annex, which was just in Cole Harbor, right beside Cole Harbor Place. And grade 11 and 12 was at the Harbor Annex on the other side. Jeez. So there was a lot of transition, a lot of movement. It's always hard to get consistency and stuff, but throughout that we're all together, right? The group of us from the community, so we're all together. But that, we're all together. I mean, in those classes where you do, back then they called them academic prep classes, you were fortunate if you had 1 or 2, people from our community that were even in them together, right? So, that was all part of it, but it gets to the athletics. So in the athletics, it was an opportunity for us to do those things that we did on the roads and in the fields together in something that was somewhat organized. And we got to see some of our other friends because we'd play against neighboring communities. So we had relatives and cousins in East Preston and Cherry Brook, so we'd play against them. So it was always great to see them. I still remember my first year playing sport in grade 7 and grade 7 on the basketball team, playing in I have a cousin, I think he was 6'7" in grade 9 or something. Anyway, and
I wish.
Danny's dream.
But and I remember him in that first grade 7 game dunking, and I was going, well, and I was like, we're opposite team, but I was like, Well done. Well done. Anyway, but that was our first taste of real organized sport.
Yeah.
Doing a little bit of that, and it was good. So I played a few sports that year, and fortunate enough, I was athlete of the year that year, and then I moved on to Robert Borden, and that's where I learned to win.
Mm-hmm.
I learned to win at Sir Robert Borden, and that was through volleyball. So I had a few people that took a real interest in some of us from our community. There were about 3 of us from our community, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays we'd have something called a late bus. So that bus would take us to our community back and forth, so we could stay 2 or 3 hours after school and get back, which allowed us to do some stuff. And we had a couple teachers, one teacher in particular, Mr. Reed, who took an interest in us and trying to make sure that we had all the time we needed to develop that sport. He was also the volleyball coach, so we'd be able to go in first thing in the morning. We set up stuff, get in early, learn some of that responsibility, but we were able to be there after school and learn some of the fine art of playing volleyball. And I remember it's funny because my first game that I played, I don't know if the girls even know this one, is that, so we played a team outside of the community in Eastern Passage, and I tout myself as a pretty decent athlete, but I didn't know much about the real game until we started to learn. But I remember my first game. I think when I went, and if anyone knows anything about volleyball, I think my first one I did my approach and came up, and I think I took the whole net up, and the other guy on the other side took the whole net down. So it was like, that was the first stint of it. But by the time we got to the end of that school year, we were pretty good. And I was pretty good, and we won the junior high championship that year for the first time in that school's history. So we did that again the following year as well. I mean, it wasn't an easy task. And in high school, I did basketball for a year and as well, but we couldn't play 2 sports, so we just did a few tournaments and got some MVPs and some of that. But I had to pick a sport, so I picked volleyball, and we won the 3 straight provincial championships in high school volleyball. The last one we won, just to say, now you're talking about a black volleyball team.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is
that's what you're talking about, a black volleyball team.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it's not just a volleyball team, a black volleyball team. And my final year, we had a chance to play the OFSA, I think the Ontario OFSA champions, which was Colonel By.
Whoa,
Right?
whoa, wait a minute. Full circle moment. I'm a Colonel By alum.
Oh, there you go.
I actually did not talk about that until now. We just found out that. Did you guys win?
We played Colonel By.
I know Colonel By was pretty good at volleyball.
Yeah, they were dominant. They had a lot of 6 foot whatever players across the board, and we're a small team. And I was actually middle blocker at 5'10". So, because I had to move into middle block to help for that game. I'm outside.
You could jump.
I could do a little bit of that. Yeah, and so they moved me on the inside for that championship game. So picture this. So you have all the junior high teams from across the province at the Dow Classic, the Housey Classic high school tournament. All the junior high teams that were there, girls and boys. And then you had all the high school teams that were there to watch girls and boys. And so the gym is packed, center court. And everyone's cheering on the home team to play Colonel By, who was just dominating in the tournament. So we're undefeated, they're undefeated. And so you're looking across, and it was a best of 3. And the home team, 2-0. And with us me as a middle blocker, 100% kill efficiency.
Wow.
And we that was big. So we weren't just the best in Nova Scotia, we're the best in Ontario too, right? Wow. So we did there. We learned how to win. We learned what it took to win. We learned the dedication, the effort, the commitment, and the sacrifice that it took in order to be good at what you did, right? To learn your craft. And because of that, it allowed me to take those skills and be able to transfer those skills into what I did at the university level. So from that, I played university volleyball for 3 years at Dalhousie. We won 3 AUS championships, as well as first team All-Star. And then from there, I said, well, I only have 2 more years left as eligibility, and I want to play a little bit of football. So I redshirted my last year of my first degree at University of Alberta. Got a chance to work with a lot of Hall of Fame football coaches like Tom Wilkinson, Dave Cutler, you name it. And I redshirted that year. I said I didn't want to play. I didn't want my eligibility to conclude without my second degree.
Yeah.
So I redshirted, even though they wanted me to play, and they were really good about it. And then the following year, I came back and played with Larry Utek, who was my coach at St. Mary's University.
The Utek Bowl.
Yes, that's what it's named after, Larry, right? And so Coach Wilkinson called UTEC and just let him say, you got a kid coming from here, from me. And he said, this kid can play. I know you guys just finished that Vanier Cup last year, and you got every defensive player coming back, but I think you're going to like this kid. So I came on and I went out, and of course you got all the naysayers. You're always going to have people saying, well, you never played football before. How are you going to play? They just come from Vanier Cup. They're the best. Anyway, so I go out and I play well, and I break the starting lineup, right? And the only fun to come in to break the starting lineup on the corner, right? So, and then
Which is not easy. It's not
no, and DB right here, right? DB right here, right?
Corner spot.
That's right. And if you,
football.
right, and if you guys know anything, the guy I had on the other side of me was Jerome Pathon, who played in the NFL with New Orleans and Indianapolis, right? So Jerome was on the other side, and for Acadia at that time, right? And I got a chance to play there, but I mean, I can run. Right, I can do a little bit of that. I can do a little bit. I just like this is what it is. I can do a little bit of that, and so but Jerome can run too.
Yeah.
So, but I could keep up with him. So that year we played. We won AUS again, and then unfortunately we lost in the bowl game. And then the following year, same thing. First team All Star. We win again, and then we lose in the bowl game. They're close games, but that's just how it goes. And but. It's one thing I learned there because my first year we had a couple guys that went in the first round. Yeah. So we had Tony Bailey. Tony's about 6'5", defensive lineman, defensive end, 260 or whatever. But Tony's just a specimen.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, his mom was 100-meter track athlete for Team Canada, Marjorie Bailey. Right, from Nova Scotia, and so Tony had all those things. But we worked, and we had another gentleman named we had Anthony Oxley, but we also had another DB that was with the Ottawa at that time. It was the Ottawa Rough Riders. It was the Rough Riders back then. I know so many transitions of teams and everything else. Like we paid their bills for 1 year. Didn't get that back as players, but so. They were there, and so I knew that I had a chance because Tony and the rest would come back and they see my, what I was doing, because then they'd look at what everyone else was doing too. I put the work in, and then got invited to the Combine, and that's an interesting story because I know the two gentlemen here in the room. Will be showing off their wares at the Combine sometime this year as well. So
shout out to AK.
That's it.
Big shout out.
So looking forward to hearing about that. So I may even try to get in there. I don't know. We'll see. I got some friends my friends are all coaching or running teams now, GM.
I'm sure
so
you can make a call there.
That's it.
I'm sure you know a guy.
So. I was able to get to the Combine, and so I was getting a lot of letters. We sent out some packages. A lot of letters come from NFL teams, people wondering, who is this kid? These numbers can't be for real, and all this.
What were the numbers? Do you remember the numbers?
Yeah, the numbers. Some of the numbers. The numbers were, well, look, I played volleyball, and as 5'10" middle blocker, beating Colonel Bai, who had the best team in the country. And they can play. Those guys can play. Played university all-stars and MVPs, and so I can jump.
Yeah.
Right.
At 40?
Yeah, I can
40?
jump. At the Combine, I don't think it was. I think it was 30. It was low. I think it was 39, 30.
He said
38.
low.
He said low.
39.
1 inch.
39.
I think it was around there.
39
and so, but I knew what I could do. So what you guys go through. They'll go and they'll do interviews with the teams. So each player will sit down with all the teams, and they go run you through the paces, and they ask you all that stuff. And I remember sitting down with one team in particular, and they were asking, so what do you? So son, I know, from St. Mary's, looking through my files. So what are you going to run tomorrow, right? And I said, well, look, on a slow day, I'll run 4.4, right? And I said, right? And so what? But see the reaction. I said, on a slow day, I run 4.4, and they looked at me like I was crazy. Both, like all three of them, they looked at me and they went. Now these interviews usually go about 10 minutes or so, a little bit longer, 15 minutes each player, and that was when I was in minute 2. And they looked at me and they looked at each other. Thank you, son. Thank you, son. Next. I said, you're done already? I said, yeah, we got enough, son. We got enough, right? because they didn't think they didn't think the numbers were legit. Anyway, we went through all that. The next morning, we get up and we do the vertical, we do all that stuff, and then it's 40 time now, right? So everyone got their old watches out. There's no electronic anything out there at that time. Everyone got the watches out, and so a couple guys are running out doing some things, and so I get out and I run, and as I get past the line, I see all 8 teams running behind me, right? And they're like, is that the fastest you ever ran, son? And I said, no. I said, on a slow day, I run 4.4. Some of them had it. I ran a 4.36. Right, 4.36. Some had 4.28, and I said
4.28. Wait, guys, we're not.
That was a clock time.
We can't gloss over that. 4.28 is insane.
So it's funny though. The team that gave me the 2 minutes, and he laughs to this day. Rambo used to. Dan Rambo. When after I got drafted, he laughed about it the whole time. I went in the first round with Saskatchewan with Dan Rambo and the guys that dismissed me for the first round.
The guy that dismissed you after 2 minutes.
Yeah, because I said I'm just from our telling the truth, right? Small town country boy, just telling the truth about what we can do. But I put the work in, so I knew what I could do. Yeah. So it wasn't a guess, right? It wasn't a guess. So
we'll talk about. I think we'll talk about that. We'll go into that right now. Actually, the hard work that it takes to. I mean, out of that long list of accomplishments that he's had, I'm sure in this room we also have our little accomplishments, little MVPs. And I never played volleyball at Colonel By, but I won a championship playing football at Colonel By, and I was
Tier 2.
Okay,
Tier 2.
You don't have to talk about that. It was Tier 2, but we won a championship.
A championship.
He won Tier 1. Okay, whatever. I was Finals MVP. Cool, whatever. But I'm sure we all have those stories, but a lot of the time as black athletes. Yeah. I think one hurdle that, maybe it's not a hurdle, but one kind of stereotype that's rooted in racism that we have to face is, oh, you're just fast because you're black, or you're just strong because you're black. And that's something that I've had to deal with because I could put up numbers in the gym and I've always kind of had that raw strength, and people just like, oh. In high school, I went to Colonel By, which is a lot of white people. So people just kind of write it off as, oh, it's because you're black. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And kind of discredits the hard work that we put in. Yeah. So I wonder if we've had experiences at AK or Savannah or Alyssa, have had experiences dealing with that, kind of having that hard work or dedication being written off and being like, oh, it's because you're black that you're good at basketball, or because you're black that you're good at football. Do you guys have kind of experiences dealing with that?
You go first?
Well, I'd say especially for basketball, it's kind of like a stereotypical black people play basketball, this and that, whatever. But it kind of diminishes the work, the extra time that you put in, after hours in the gym, this and that, just to get where you are. Exactly. So I wouldn't say that my skills just come because of the color of my skin. That's not how it goes.
Can be. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, most definitely. I think a lot of times it just gets pushed down to your genetics must be good, or you were just naturally good at this stuff. And people that know me from where I've come from, and they know where I was at, they know personally that none of it was genetics. None of it was I did not have I wasn't blessed with a lot of good genetics, you know what I mean? But I just knew that when I looked around that I had to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard. So it's sometimes I look at where I'm at now, and I'm and I look at the kid that was out there 4, 5, 6 years ago, and I'm I get discredited a lot, but I know the people that are around me that have seen it, and I think that's all that matters to me at the end of the day. So
yeah, it's definitely frustrating because it's almost as if I didn't earn my position, and other players' parents would also kind of why aren't their daughters, the center of the center of the stage? Why is it me in a sense? So it's kind of I didn't earn my position due to my skill or whatever. I was just given to me despite all the hard work I put in. So that was always a running theme growing up.
Yeah, and that's something that's just one of the things that we have to deal with, overcome. I mean, it's hard to I don't know. It's hard to. There's not really much you can do about the way other people think, right? Yeah. It's not really. I mean, if people want to think that you didn't put in hard work, it's what can I do about it? But I know, and we know what we've been doing behind closed doors and the hard work that goes into being that. and definitely being a professional athlete for as long as you were, Dwayne, 8 years in the league, stint in the NFL, sticking on the first round in the CFL. That's no small feat, so we can't just write that off too.
Yeah. But I think it's always important, though, when we have the opportunity, when people do make comments that are really rooted in systemic racism and stereotypes, that we have the ability to rebut those and let them know, well, you know, I put a lot of hard work into this, right? I wasn't this when I started, right? People didn't see the times and the days and the sacrifices that I made in order to get there. You know, in the gym every day, doing the you know, the footwork on the field every day, then doing the track stuff at night, and like you know, eating, doing, and so that's an entire day where, you know, I used to have the night watchman would have to, because it was getting dark. You know, I'd be out on the track from the morning till the night. They don't see that sacrifice. It's assumed that you get where you get because of who you are and because you may happen to be black and have some skill, but some skill. There's a lot of folks out there with some skill that don't get to the pros.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's something to be highlighted for sure. That's even more reason to celebrate Black accomplishment, whether it's in sport, outside of sport, whatever it is. I mean, the work that has to go in, and we might have, if we want to call it a head start genetically, maybe. I know I've seen research that says like people from this region in Africa are better sprinters and things like that. But there's still a lot of hard work that has to go in every facet of life. And I think that's a perfect transition for kind of the next part of the discussion we'll dive into here with Dwayne, is that transition from being an accomplished athlete to kind of the real world, as people will call it, the workforce. So kind of catch us up on where you are now and what you've been doing since your journey. I know it's been a long there's a lot that he's doing, and clearly from the bio there's a lot that he has done since his athletic career, and not to be understated, like you still got more coming, right? So let's talk about that. What have you been doing since your athletic journey, and kind of where has that led you today?
You know, like all sports, you know, unless you're Tom Brady, you don't usually play until you're 46, right? So, or you're Army Yager in hockey, right? You don't play that long. So it came to a point where I made a decision that at some point you're going to have to call it, right? You know, after being in New England and everything going extremely well on the team and all, and having an injury that sort of put me on injury reserve for the year. Some would have called it a career-ending injury, but I was able to come back the following year, but back to the CFL with it, and still fast though. Still fast.
Not 4.28 though.
No, but 4. You know,
4.29.
no. 4.4. But it was. Making that decision to get into what you call the real world profession, having been blessed enough to do what I liked for 8 years, but also knowing that before I graduated and went to New England, so I was drafted first round with Saskatchewan, but went to New England with Parcells that first year. I had 2 degrees. So I wanted to time it so that my academics were where I needed them to be, so I had a whole bunch to fall back on. And so knowing that I had that, and then taking a look at that time, I think our CFL cap was around 2.5 million or something like that now, but that was I'm not certain if what that cap wasn't that much, right?
Yeah.
And in the big scheme of things, so it was a big difference between what I had in the NFL for those years with Parcells and with Pete Carroll, and then what I had in the CFL. So at some point I had to make a decision, right? And so I came back and spoke with some folks, and I'm in the education sector. So what I do during the off season, I go back home, and in schools that had kids that looked like me, and from environments in which I grew up in, I made sure I would sub, right? So I'd do a turn. So I wouldn't go, I'd say, okay, I can do a week at this school, right? And I go into the school, kids all knew I played football and all that stuff, and so I encourage kids to do this and that. And so, and I picked the schools that I went to, or the schools that the kids had, some more challenges than most, right? And so as a result of that, it was a good segue when I came back to the Black Educators Association. I took a role with them as the running the coordinator for the Regional Educators Program, which is programming across the province that helped African Nova Scotian students or students of African descent with academics, but as well as putting and infusing culture into those pieces. So it was almost like we could help you with your homework, right? Give some tutoring, but also give you some knowledge about who you are and what you are. So we ran those programs right across the province in 28 different communities. And I spearheaded that, and then moved into the role of executive director, successful at that. And then we expanded offices and made sure that things were running properly, and had a lot of input from the regional centers of education or school boards, right, depending on where you are, on issues that impact students of African descent and the challenges that they face inside the school setting. So we'd make sure that we were there when students were disciplined, because we found that there were discrepancies in discipline for black students as it was for white students. So there'd be a fight that was called because you were called the N-word or something like that, yet you would get more time out of school than the person who actually perpetrated the harm, right? So we'd have to go in, and we were there to do all that. And so the fight has been long. And to be quite honest, the fight has been, it's been about 20 years now that I've done a lot of things in the middle of that, but none of it's really strayed away from making sure that I'm advocating for what's best for my people and for the future, which is all you guys, right? That we have a bigger voice and more of a voice, and that we're counted. We tend to sometimes just assume that it's there. It's not there. Everything that I have came because there's somebody that we may not even know did something to create that small window of opportunity to allow me to be here and in the role that I am, being able to influence now policy within Nova Scotia, but also at the federal, provincial, and territorial level, I'm able to influence some policies as we go forward. But that's because somewhere, somehow, someone said something or did something that created that small window along the way, and there's small increments. And that person may not have gotten any credit for what they've done, but they stood up at some point. And because of it, you typically, when you stand up for issues that impact people of African descent, marginalized groups, the reaction from those who may not be reflective of that group is one of, they tend to then ostracize you to some extent, right? But you can see it, right? And so there goes, he's going to talk about black stuff. And he's going to talk about, and so, the reality is, we need to continue to talk about it. It's important to us, and it shows itself in a number of ways. I mean, no one has to take a look at at anything but the news nowadays to find out how we're brutalized and traumatized across North America, which also includes us. Sometimes we're a great country, but sometimes we think that everything happens in the U.S. And it's not. It's here as well, and in different ways, and sometimes not in different ways. So we need to make sure that we pay attention to those things so that we don't spiral more downward. And the only way we do that is to have those serious, hard conversations about what race really is, and talk about the marginalizations and the microaggressions that take place on a daily basis that folks have to actually endure. And when I say that, I mean we talk about racialized groups and we talk about marginalization, but when we're specifically talking about people of African descent, black is a disparity of health, right? It's been deemed that by Health Canada, it's not, we know that we face a lot of adverse consequences based on how we look, right? And it's a reality. The idea is, I'm never one to worry about how people feel in terms of feel good. You can't count on people feeling good in order to make a difference for folks of African descent and even marginalized people to that extent. It's really about policy for me. So if you have a policy in place that keeps people, that speaks to the marginalization, that tries to rectify the marginalization, but also have consequences and accountability mechanisms built into it, that's how you change things, right? Because I can't depend on whether someone feels good because it came from church on Sunday and they're going to treat me good today, but by Wednesday having a rough day, and now, all the microaggressions all start. So for us, it's really about making sure that we're embedding the policies in all aspects and phases of what life is to be in Canada, so that we have an ability to function freely and fully in all that Canada has to offer. So, having an opportunity to get to some of that now, and having been a pro athlete and a university athlete as well, I've been able to transition some of those key skills and that you learn, teamwork and all those aspects of it, and you learn. You adjust, right? But you also, and you would know as a defensive back, got to have a short memory. You can't drag that other stuff into what you're doing the next minute, or it'll cause you to make a mistake, right? And so we have to be able to, compartmentalize these things and then still deal with them in a way that we think is going to be productive and get us some movement forward for not just us but future generations. When you look at our in Nova Scotia, our Mi'kmaq community, our Indigenous community, and they have a thing where they look 7 generations out. I think from us as an African Nova Scotian, but also people of African Canadians, I think we need to start looking a little bit more to looking out for generationally, so that we're making sure that you guys aren't just doing the same things that I'm doing. Right?
Yeah.
And by fighting the same battle that I'm fighting, whether it's university sport, right, or whether it's in your professional careers as in the workforce, it's the same thing. You want to have this. You want to have the access that isn't predicated on the color of your skin, because when you show up, you don't have the ability to hide what that is. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So
I think one big thing that you just mentioned is the generational aspect of it.
Yeah.
I think this is a fitting conversation for this setting. So there's battles you fought in your time professionally, both athletically and in the workforce, that you were hoping that your daughters wouldn't have to fight today. So I'm just wondering what that looked like in the household, in terms of education, in terms of kind of disseminating the knowledge that you had gained both firsthand and through your kind of career pursuits. How did you incorporate that into the way you raised your kids? And then also I'll get Savannah and Alyssa's perspective of it, how that kind of was in the upbringing and how it led to you joining the BSAAC and being active agents of change now. So I'll just start with the father and we'll get into the daughters.
Yeah. I think a lot of, if not all, African Canadian parents, when everyone's protective of their kids for the most part, and so when our kids are entering environments that we know have not been built for us, but we're part of, that we also try to prepare our kids so that they can protect themselves from the harms that we know as adults are part of what's coming at some point, right? So you try to give them the words and give them the abilities to be able to not only address those things, but to try to move forward in a positive way, without ruining their relationships and their social settings and all the other settings. I mean, I go back even with sports. So, once my girls were of age and started to do sports, I went into coaching. A lot of coaching, right, girls? A lot of like they won't tell you, but they were phenomenal fast pitch softball players. MVP, 2-time MVP. Alyssa played. Alyssa was like, I think she was 10, playing with the 15-year-olds, right? So, shortstop, could bat both ways, and I think the girls were.
You got a family of multi-sport athletes.
Yeah, and so was their older sister. But I do remember when, I think your older sister is not here, Ariel, was 11, and we had, I think we were playing the U12 provincial championships, and we were a certain part of the province. Anyway, Alyssa was playing up, right, and Savannah was playing up by a year, and my other older daughter, who was extremely good too, she was playing there, and we were a good team. So I coached, and we were a really good team. And I had to take my 12-year-old aside and have that conversation with her about, you're the best player here. Everybody knows you're the best player here. You're already hearing the complaints that you're the best player here, right? From parents, you could hear it, right? Okay, so every game they pick player of the games, and then there's an MVP and all this. I had to tell her, telling an 11-year-old or so, 11, I don't know if she was 12 at that time, might have been 11, but that we know, because there's some more issues around, with the racial components and all that stuff as well, that, okay, no matter what you do here, you're not going to be player of the game. You're not going to be MVP, no matter how well you play.
Yeah.
That's not easy for a parent to do based upon race, right? Yeah. And reactions of those who are judging. And it just so happened she played extremely well. You guys all played extremely well, and we won. But in that tournament, Savannah, you might remind me, but in that tournament, she was okay with it because not getting MVP, even though she was, because the MVP was actually her sister, because they couldn't deny she pitched a no-hitter.
There you go.
In the championship game. He pitched the no-hitter in the championship game. But I think the year prior to that, she was we won again, and she was, usually the MVP comes from the team, and it should have been her, and she didn't get it. It was given to someone from the second place team or something, and our sport body had to deal with that later. And then they, during the next season, came to one of the games and awarded her with the MVP later, because we didn't let it lie, right?
Yeah.
We had to bring that up. It's not okay. I think that's part of it. So often we tend to be nice about some of the microaggressions, and some are macro, and we tend to let things go. I think we need not let those things go and bring them to light. But it also helps when we have organizations or institutions that have the ability to support some parents that may not feel that they have the agency to do it themselves. So I think a capacity building for me is a big thing. When I took on this role where I am now, and I just want to say, African Nova Scotian Affairs, our office is the only office of its kind in the country. No other province has an office dedicated to people of African descent, except Nova Scotia.
It's huge. Wow.
Right,
Yeah.
And we'd like to see more take on, and I can advocate more at these federal, provincial, territorial tables. But with that being said, when I first took over about a year and a half now or so, the first thing I needed to do is make sure that our folks had access. First of all, access to all programs, programs and departments for which these departments have responsibilities for delivering. But the second piece was capacity. And so the capacity piece is making sure that we had capacity inside our communities so that our folks had the ability to access.
Yeah.
No sense giving access if you don't have capacity.
Yeah.
So if you're talking, so that's why I'm saying the BSAAC, absolutely wonderful. That's capacity,
Yep.
right? Without that, you guys it's a body now that has the ability to have a voice, right? And without those, you don't, all those individual, microaggressions and macroaggressions, they're just, they're seen as individual acts when they're not.
Yeah.
Cumulatively, it adds up to anti-black racism, right?
And it's representative of a much
larger, but you're creating the capacity. So, and then you can't get to action without the capacity. And as a group across this country, I think we need to look at that a little bit more seriously as we go and make sure that we're truly being inclusive of all of us, right? That's the other piece. Creating capacity, but not including everyone isn't okay either.
Yeah.
Right. So we've been making some moves here in Nova Scotia, and other provinces have been asking, and so we're always open to do that and share. But I was really pleased when I heard that this group was formed here at the university. I think, look, I want to give a shout out to all of you.
we get our own round of applause.
This is really what it's all about.
Yeah.
It's about the next generation. It's about you guys understanding the kind of influence, impact that you can have, right? And it starts here, right? This is where minds are developed, right? And it starts right here. So I'm very pleased to see this group going, and that's why I had no hesitation when my girls said, Dad, you're going to be part of this. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, they prefaced, like they told me that their dad was, like, he could talk and he was well spoken, and I was like, okay, cool, it'd be cool to have him on. I did not know that he was the Associate Deputy Minister of African Nova Scotian Affairs. So I was very excited to find that out, and I mean, like, just the wealth of knowledge that you have both through experience and being well read on these issues and things like that. I mean, that's great. Just knowledge to have, but also to pass down. That's the big thing for me, I think. is that generational wealth that
Yeah.
that not only you know, but that your kids after you know, that
Yeah.
their kids after them know. So we'll get into Savannah and Alyssa's experience with that in the household and how that kind of shaped you and brought you to where you are now in terms of your wanting to be involved in things like that.
Absolutely. With, like, a person like my dad as your dad, like, it just makes you want to, you know, just you want to be like him. Like, when I heard of BSAAC, I was like, okay, obviously I want to join.
Yeah.
The amount of things my dad has done, I could at least do this one little thing and, you know, be a part of a team of like-minded individuals and, you know, promote change within, you know, the little community, the little Black athlete community that we are. So it's like, you know, you just want to be like Dad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Alyssa?
I'd say the same thing. Like, just having someone like Dad in the household day to day, just like a great role model, and it's just like when I grow up, like I want to be like my dad. Like
Right.
he does so much. Like academics is a very important part, something that he focuses on. So academics is important to us, sports as well, and then just his job focusing on improving the lives of people of African descent is like it is like us. So it's like everybody. So it's something that I want to as well help out
Yeah.
No,
in what I can.
I want to preface this a little bit because Mom deserves a lot of credit. So, Mom, when you're
Shout out-
watching this,
shout out Mom.
right? When you're watching
Mom
this,
gets a round of applause.
Mom,
Always behind the scenes.
That's right. That's right. And
Definitely.
hey, Mom's an athlete, and she was
Yes.
Canada Games flag bearer, Dalhousie women's volleyball captain and MVP, right? And so Mom can hold her own,
Yes.
right? So
I mean, this is really, I'm really happy we had this because this is what the BSAAC is all about. At its core, this is what it's all about. I think definitely getting the ball rolling at our level. This is like a microcosm of what you're doing at your level. I mean, obviously at a much bigger scope, but I mean, what we've been trying to do is that representation, the visibility of having accomplished Black athletes. We have, I mean, amongst us and Bridget, and we have so many accomplished Black athletes at the university that make up this body, and the only thing that we can do is continue to try to be representative of the larger Black community that we have. And I mean, things like this, the podcast itself, I mean, the birth of it was having a voice and being able to voice our opinions on certain issues. Last week we talked about the kind of tensions that were happening at the University of Ottawa and our role in it, and how kind of we had to be front line because there's no one else. Who else is going to do the work if we didn't do it, which is the kind of the birth of the BSAAC. So I mean, definitely great to have Dwayne Provo on. I mean, do you have any last remarks, any other messages you want to get out, and then I'll wrap us up and we'll get out of here.
Probably because it's African Heritage Month. But I probably would say, in relation to inclusion and all those things that folks want to say, I want to talk about, and you hear a lot about it now. But the reality is, if we're truly talking about inclusion and inclusivity, it's really about everybody has a part to play, regardless as to who you are. So it's not about what Black folks are doing. It's about what everyone's doing. What are you doing to make things better for not just folks that are around you, but just in general to create that kind of environment that you would want for yourself. And so I guess I'll part on that, right?
Yeah.
So that'll be my parting. It's everyone's responsibility, and everybody has a part to play. And I just wanted to give a shout out. Also, this is absolutely wonderful to be here. Right, with you guys from BSAAC, but also the fact that we have some folks that look like us that are putting this thing together.
Yeah.
And I'm always a big proponent of making sure that our voices are there in journalism and media and other ways as well. So I was really pleased to see that. So great
Big
job.
shout out to BIA Media.
That's right.
He stole my line. I usually do the shout out to the end. I usually do the shout out to the end. I always appreciate BIA Media, man, for putting this thing together and helping us get our voices heard. I mean, you can't be heard without the microphone, right?
Absolutely.
You can't be heard without the microphone. So definitely big shout out to BIA Media for giving us the microphone and letting our voices be heard. Anyone else have any closing remarks? Y'all have anything to say?
just appreciate you.
I can talk for all of it. Yeah, you got it, AK.
No, definitely, I definitely appreciate you being here. I think one message that definitely stuck to me from what you said, and there was a lot that stuck to me, obviously, but it's just like learning to build those systemic accountability measures where it's like one person can't go, even though you have obviously traveled and met with a lot of schools and been in a lot of communities. It's almost unfair to ask one person to do all that, and it's like we got to start thinking, like you said, 7 generations deep. Where it's like, how can I build a system that's going to hold this entire community, this entire city accountable? You know what I mean? And that's where you make changes in small spots over the country, over the city, over the province. So
Absolutely.
Big round of applause. Big round of applause to my guests. This has been a great discussion. I mean, I think it's a perfect way to wrap up the podcast. I mean, if you're watching, if you're listening, to Dwayne Provo, play your role. I mean, whatever it is, whether it's being kind, being generous, whether it's supporting a Black-owned business, whatever your role and wherever you can make an impact in that light of inclusivity and inclusion, make that impact and let your voice be heard, man. Shout out to the BSAAC again. Shout out to the BSAAC for putting this together, for being here. Everyone that's been on these episodes. Shout out to Stefan, to Callie, to Destin, to Adrian. Again, shout out to BIA Media. This Black History Month, we've done a lot and we still have a lot more to do, and we want to continue to do that over the years to come. So in any way you can continue to support the BSAAC, check our Instagram, BSAAC, BSAAC.UO, YouTube, Spotify, and any way you can support, we really appreciate it. But until next time, guys, it's been great. See you next time. Big round of applause to take us out.